Hello, I'm Penny Thornton and I'm talking astrology. I'm specifically talking about the new moon in Pisces set to take place on the 13th of March. This full moon, if you're interested, is 23 degrees of Pisces and 4 minutes. And it's also happening at 10:21 in the morning, UTC, Universal Time, but that will mean 5 o'clock in the morning, 5:21, on the eastern seaboard of the United States. Now, of course, this new moon is happening somewhere in your natal chart. It's going to be different for everybody. And so the house that it's in is going to tell you the area of life that the qualities of this new moon in Pisces is going to manifest, and also with this idea of a new beginning. And there can be major new beginnings like moving house or getting married or having a baby, starting a new job. And there can be minor new beginnings when you start a new set of activities, or it's something a little bit more seasonal and you're clearing away clothes and aspects of what's been going for a few months, and now you're getting a fresh start in terms of how you look and what you do. So it varies from sign to sign. But certainly, I think if you're a Pisces, if you're a Virgo, if you're a Gemini, and if you're a Sagittarius, then this new moon is going to be a little bit more important. And that's because the new moon will be taking place in your solar chart in one of the angular houses. And they're the more dynamic and important areas of your horoscope. So, for instance, for Pisces, well, of course, it may be your birthday as well. And that is always a new beginning, isn't it? The solar return, setting him out, embarking on a new year's journey. But in general, for Pisces, even if you've had your birthday or it's to come a little bit later in March, there's this idea of a new chapter. And it manifests really in terms of your personal desires, the things that you personally care about. And it's all about your image. And when we think about your image, it can be anything from deciding to look different. I want a new hairstyle. I want some new clothes. I just want to look different. But it can also be your image in the sense of what you do for a living. So that change of image could be a little bit more powerful. But it's a reboot, really, certainly in Pisces, a new year-long cycle beginning. When we come to Virgo, the opposite sign, we're looking at a new cycle beginning for relationships. And relationships, of course, is a huge kind of area. We have relationships with our friends, with our family, with our colleagues at work, with business partners, if we have a business. And of course, the ones that really cause us the greatest happiness and the greatest despair are intimate and romantic relationships. So we've got a new cycle beginning. And that can mean if you're, in a long-term relationship, or, we're looking at other kinds of relationships, it's getting a bit of a reboot. So you're starting off with some new influences and some new ideas about, or a kind of infusion of new things into an existing relationship. For others, it is literally about a new relationship. So within the next couple of weeks, a new relationship is going to begin. And of course, looking at this idea really with Pisces, in 6 months' time, when there is a full moon, so we have a full moon in Pisces, we'll get some idea of where these new beginnings led to. So I think around this time, be conscious about the new beginnings you're making, whether they are, in Virgo's case, related to relationships, meeting someone new, making a decision about an existing relationship. Make it conscious in the sense that in 6 months' time, you're going to have some results from the steps you take around this time. Now, when we come to Gemini, this new moon is in the area of career and life direction and the material world. So a new start, a new chapter. This could mean anything from a new job to a sort of new aspect of what you do for work. And it can also be related to your status. So when we think about it, if you get a qualification that would add to your status, maybe you get letters behind your name. And we could also be looking at the material world in the sense of ambitions that you've had, the plans that you're working towards to make your material world more stable or better. Then that new moon is going to help. It'll introduce something new into the arena, and it's a positive thing, not a negative. When we come to Sagittarius, this new moon is taking place at the very base of your chart. This area is about the foundations of the future. It's about your family, your home life. And it's very interesting because as I was thinking about this before I did this video, I was thinking about my youngest son, who's a Sagittarian, and how appropriate this is for him because he's going to be moving house around that new moon. And the other thing related to family is that I'm going to be coming home. I'm going to be going back to England. So for him, this is really quite a new start in many ways. And if we look out at Team Sagittarius, maybe you yourself can see things in your life that really resonate with this idea of new beginnings. So those are my 4 kind of major signs. But as I said, be creative. If you know the house your new moon will be in, you can think of those new chapters. But of course, a new moon isn't just a new moon. It isn't just about new beginnings. It's really about its place in the bigger scheme of things. In other words, what's the rest of the astrology doing? And in this case, this is really quite powerful because the new moon is conjunct Venus and it's also conjunct Neptune. It's like a complete alignment, Sun, Moon, Venus, and Neptune. And Neptune is both the ruler of Pisces, so it adds a certain kind of double whammy effect to Pisces. It's a kind of new moon on steroids. It's very powerful indeed. New beginnings are going to come in. Wow, power packed. And also with the idea of Neptune, we're going to introduce so many other ideas linked to this planet. When we think about Neptune, what does Neptune mean in astrology? It's a very rarefied kind of influence. When we think about Neptune, the god of the oceans, Poseidon, Neptune, that enormous, great world, it's both a beautiful world, but it's also a dangerous world. A lot of things under the surface of the ocean can be very dangerous. And in keeping with this idea with Neptune, it's a magical effect. We can have some of our most elevating experiences with this planet when we fall in love, when we feel that soul connection with someone, when we have a moment of great inspiration, especially if we're artistic or creative. Neptune speaks to us. It's like the muse. We've, connected with our muse and great things emerge. And often we do selfless things under Neptune. We don't think about ourselves anymore. We think about other people and we give of ourselves selflessly. Those are all beautiful Neptune qualities. And so we can look to this new moon conjunct Neptune from really bringing these qualities into our lives, into our experience. But we can't look at it only in that way. We have to also look at the negatives of Neptune, which are chaos, confusion. You're not seeing anything in its reality. We're seeing something false. It's not real. All that glisters isn't gold. And if we look at this just generally and we think about, things that we believe, rumors doing the rounds, do we buy into those rumors? Absolutely not on a Neptune transit. Never, ever. Wait until we know the reality. And also Neptune can indicate loss and sacrifice. And if we do a willing sacrifice, that's like being selfless in a way. We give something up, we do it for another person consciously. That's a beautiful thing. It's an enriching thing. But if we're forced to sacrifice something, we're turned into a sacrificial lamb, we lose something, that's not so easy to contend with. But then we need to look at the whole Neptune experience, because that's what's presented to us on a plate around this time of the new moon in Pisces on the 13th of March. But there's more to this full moon even than that. This new moon, sorry. The new moon and Neptune, of course, is connecting to the planet Pluto, the planet of transformation, death and rebirth, elimination. We're familiar with those words because of all the things we talked about Pluto last year. Neptune and Pluto in a positive angle with each other, the new moon connected to Pluto in that positive way. We're looking at renewal. That's the single word we can put to this new moon in general for all of us. But I think too, because it's in the sign of Pisces, we're looking at a spiritual renewal, a spiritual regeneration. That's something available to us all. It's available to humanity, and we'll all experience it in very different ways. And of course, you know, I like to look at world events and what's going on in the world out there. And it will be interesting to see what events we can really connect to this new moon and Pluto and Neptune, all the things I've talked about. Will there be a renewal of some way of some kind that we can see very clearly mapped out in global events? I hope so. There's certainly a renewed ambition to try to do something about climate change, a really strong focus on everybody in places where there is less money available to get the vaccine. There's all of that kind of stuff going on in a very humanitarian, spiritual way. In fact, that leads me very neatly into another thing I want to talk about in connection with Neptune, and in particular, this alignment that will be building from about the 3rd or 4th of March right through until the 20th of March, when the sun comes into Aries and begins the new zodiac cycle. Neptune, the coronavirus, COVID-19. I've talked about this quite a lot on my website, on my Friday Bites, that the signature, the astrological signature on the coronavirus is Neptune. The reason being that it is a very mysterious virus, especially how it was introduced to us, and it had so many manifestations. We weren't too sure where it came from, what it was, how it, how it was passed from person to person. And of course, with Neptune, we've got this great unseen world, and this idea that we can't see why we're being infected. It's airborne. But more than that, it was the very different ways it manifested, sense of smell gone. Did it affect the lungs, or was it in the brain? It went to different areas of the bodies. There were so many different ways it seemed to get into our systems. And so it has a Neptune character. And the interesting thing is that every time there's been a major development with the coronavirus, whether it was, the finding of or the delivery of the first load of vaccines, is always on Neptune. The mutations, yes, Neptune is always a figure on the astrological landscape. So we need to look to this period of time, this very, very powerful alignment. New moon, Venus, Neptune, all lined up together. There is going to be something linked to the coronavirus, linked to COVID-19, that's going to be very important. Now, remember, I'm not making a prediction here. We're just looking at signs, and we're looking at the history of the coronavirus and what we know about it. Are we looking at a positive Neptune experience in that we have a really, really positive development linked to COVID-19 that will make a difference to all our lives? And of course, all of us are hoping to have a more normal existence. We've been in lockdown, one country after another, really for well over a year now. So we're all looking for breakthroughs and to have, better experiences that we were more used to before we had it. But we have to include the negative as well. We can't just say Neptune is going to give us some positive news linked to the coronavirus. not at all. We have to be prepared for some negatives. And I mean, what could the negatives be? Maybe something about the vaccine rollout, the nature of certain vaccines, or is it a mutation that really is perhaps a little bit more difficult to manage than all the other mutations that we've known about? But that's certainly something we'll want to look at around this time, as well as I think in general, things to do with oceans. You know, Neptune can be pretty literal. There's often floods and leaks, leaks in the sense of a lot of water, but also leaks in the sense of scandal and information leaking out. So these are the things we need to look out for in terms of what our news providers are telling us, and of course in our own lives. So there is my sort of rundown, my overview of the new moon in Pisces and all the surrounding kind of influences. I think you'll agree with me that February was a much better month than January was. And that's something that I did look to on my videos. And in March, we have a similar kind of setup by and large. The influence is a little bit more gentle, they're a little bit better. And I think that does give us a lot more ease. Doesn't make life perfect. Bad things are still going to happen. But it's the general atmosphere in which we are going about our lives and going about our business. So let's concentrate too on the idea of that spiritual regeneration with Neptune and the new moon. That's something we could all do with. And when we think consciously about the astrology, we're working in harmony with the astrology. And all it takes is just one or two of us to think about regenerating our souls and our spirits that spreads out into the community and beyond. One small step for one person and a massive step for mankind. Thank you for listening, and I look forward to being here again in a couple of weeks' time. Bye for now.